Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast, and I've got a great guest for you today. His name is Mr. Shawn Shewchuk, and Shawn has a company called changeyourresults.com. That's the URL where you can find them. Shawn is a gentleman who's built the company up to $133 million. We today are going to talk about how do you create the high leverage activities in your day? How do you take time and allocate it? How do you get more productivity out of the process? How do you, in other words, keep the highest efficiency that you possibly can while keeping the highest effectiveness? And whether you're doing it yourself or you're utilizing other people's talent, how do you do that? How do you make it work for you? And how do you do that as a stress-free or as stress-free process as possible? So without further ado, let's go talk to Shawn right now. Hey, Shawn, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Now, why don't you tell people what you do so we can set the frame for this call?
That's quite a loaded question. So for more years, actually, I had a full head of hair. So I know you and I share a barber, but the reality of this is I get the privilege to work with high achievers, leadership teams, and entrepreneurs throughout the United States and Canada. And the focus is, listen, at the end of the day, most people want to grow and expand and scale. And that's really what it comes down to. The interesting part is most so-called entrepreneurs aren't really entrepreneurs, and we'll get more into that.
Well, I think that's a great starting point to jump off. Why?
Well, Michael E. Gerber in the E-Myth said that most entrepreneurs are not actually entrepreneurs. They're technicians suffering from an entrepreneurial seizure. And the reality behind what he said is so very true, because so many people are lured into the idea of being an entrepreneur because they can set their own schedule, they can do this. And I still have people who are not entrepreneurs, and I'll say, listen, I can't go away this week, or I can't do something like, well, you own the company. You can do whatever you want. And while there may be some truth to some of that, I still have a boss, and my boss happens to be our clients. And when somebody wants to pay you for something, you have to be able to deliver and deliver in spades. And, we do everything we can to ensure that we deliver a wow with every interaction. I don't know that we're perfect, but certainly that's the objective and that's the goal, is to deliver that wow. There are a lot of people today that put more time into their business than they put in when they had a job. And so part of the role of what we do is look at this and say, okay, listen, you're a really great electrician, you're a great graphic designer, you're a great consultant, you're whatever it is you are good at. You need to be focused on those things that are high leverage for you and download, delegate, automate those things that you should not be doing. So let's get clear on what you should be doing. And the reality of it is, when you hit a certain level, you cannot scale or begin to scale your business without knowing what you shouldn't be doing. And so when I ask people, what we call them HLAs, high leverage activities, how much of what you do throughout the course of your day is high leverage? And they're like, well, everything. And that's not a reality, because if I happen to be the owner or president of a company, and I'm the one sitting there hammering the keyboard, doing data entry for, the accounting, that's not a high leverage activity for me. That's a $15 or $20 an hour job that someone should be doing. Now, it's an important job and it needs to happen. And that's the general go-to. People say, well, I need to make this happen, or I need to do this, or it needs, and they're right. But you, as that leader, don't need to be doing it.
So a few things. I always believe when you become an entrepreneur, sometimes you hire the worst boss you've ever had. And that could be yourself. That could be the person who So when we leave, like I left corporate world and I did the same thing. And then I realized quickly, as soon as I got out of the corporate world, it's like, wait a minute, I don't have a human resources department. I don't have a collections department. I don't have a marketing, department I can call. I don't have a sales engineer. What happened to my sales engineer? Right, those type of things. And I quickly understood that, okay, this is all on me at this moment. And I did get caught in that trap of high priority, high leverage, do it all yourself type thing. And, so I wasn't employing high leverage. I was employing low leverage in what I thought was high priority, which was across the board. Everything was a 9 or a 10, when you fill out your sheet in the beginning. So one of the things, and I'd love your feedback on this, Shawn, when people start up, or even when they're at a place where they're doing okay in the business, and then they want to build another initiative, I find, and I'd love your feedback on this, I find that people sometimes revert back to those low leverage, put their own time in activities because of a lack of cash flow a lot of times. What's your take on that?
Yeah, 100%. You're right. The challenge is most businesses operate because there is one person at the helm. And if that person happens to not be there or be the face of the business ceases to exist. The whole point in all of us, any of us going into business, is to achieve freedom. Freedom is defined in 3 ways: the ability to do what you want, when you want, and with whom. And that really encompasses everything. And I think we forget that because human nature is, entrepreneurialism is, it has to be done. And the entrepreneur syndrome is if I'm not doing it myself, it isn't done right. And, when I speak from stage and I say this, I see people's faces smile and, or some people hang their heads because every single person watching and listening today know what I'm talking about. We get up in the morning and so many people get so far behind that their only job on a daily basis is putting out fires.
Yeah.
And let's be clear about something. If your only job is putting out fires, eventually that fire is going to get out of control and you're going to lose. Okay. So what you really need to be doing are those things that are high leverage. In other words, let me explain what this means. How do we get to a place where those things that we're doing on a very consistent basis don't allow us to have those fires? Yeah, there are things that are going to happen once in a while, but if we're doing those things, and here's the key to it, do the things first that you don't like. Don't push them to the back of the desk, to the front of the truck, outside of this, in your garage, wherever you happen to work or your bay, whatever it is. Do those things that you don't relish. Get them out of the way first, because it's the things that we don't like that we put on the back burner, that we ignore, that are going to ignite and become those fires. And let's be clear, it's an extremely high and bad use of our energy when all we do is put out fires and we're not leveraging our time in the right way to do those things or take those steps on those high leverage activities that move us forward from a growth, expansion, and scaling standpoint. Okay. I'll share a story with you if I can do this. Now, this is I share this lots. In 1999, I ended up buying a very small little consulting firm. The gentleman who ran it, nice guy, still know him quite well, still friends with him. Not a guy that could take a business and grow it. And he was doing about $100,000 a year. And, of course, that's not necessarily a lot of money when you have staff and you have lights to turn on and all these, an office space overhead. And he came to me one day and we had 2 or 3 meetings. I ended up buying this little business from him. And between 1999 and 2007, I built it from $100,000 a year. And the last fiscal year that I sat in that chair, we did $133 million. And I remember it about $9 million annually the year I brought on a CEO to run the company. Now, even still at that level, I still had some of this entrepreneur syndrome where I felt I had to be, touching everything, piece of paper, every phone call, ever knowing what. And, there's at some level, you've got to trust. So here's an interesting thing. The morning after, we'd gone through a month-long process of interviews and vetting and all this, these kinds of things with this individual. And I showed up his first full day. And I was there at 6 a.m. and he was already there. And he looked at me as I came in and I hung my coat up and he said, "What are you doing here, Shawn?" I said, "Well, I'm here to work." He said, "It's your company." He said, "But you hired me for a reason. Stay out of my way." Now, when this is your baby and someone does that and puts a knife in your chest like that, you were like, what the heck? Right? But he was right. And together, him and I took that from 9 million all the way to 133 in a relatively short period of time, matter of 4 or 5 years. and then end up selling to one of the big four. But the reality behind this is, and the hardest thing that I've ever had to do in business, yeah, I've had big failures and, very big successes, but was to let go.
So let's talk about that part, because that is a huge problem. As you and I both know, doing what we do now, it's a huge issue for people. And I always try to explain to people, look, there's a difference between efficiency and effectiveness, right? And what I mean by that is a lot of people want to be effective, but they won't let go, so they don't get the efficiency of being effective. And the truth be told is, and I don't know, Shawn, because this first time I heard that story, is that person who helped you grow from that point of 9 million to 131 or 133.
Yeah.
Don't want to short you 2 million on that one. That person probably had skill sets and had things that they could do that, frankly, you weren't as good at. And you had stuff that you were better at than they were at. And so you worked as a team. So what I found is,
you're 100% right. And the other side of the coin too is when you do bring someone in like that, and I think this is an important distinction. When you start, any one of us, when we start a business, there's a very strong emotional attachment. That is our baby. And when something goes good, it's personal, a personal success. But when something doesn't go as good as we want it to, we also take it very personally.
Right.
When you bring someone else in, that emotional attachment doesn't exist. They're able to look at it from a different standpoint. And so I'm a simple guy at some level, and I say this to people. When you bring someone else in, and this is something we do when I work one-on-one with people, and I only take on 5 one-on-one clients at any given time, but when I work one-on-one with people, one of the things we talk about is, and people smile when I say this, is an out-of-body experience. And what I really mean is you being able to look down from a 30,000 foot level and being able to see what is down the road from you. If you're on the ground, if you're on a freeway, on a highway, you aren't able to see what's 5 or 10 miles ahead. When you're up a little higher, you can see if there's an oil spill, you can see if there's a bridge out, you can see if there's an automobile accident, you can see all these things. And so what someone does that doesn't have that emotional attachment is being able to look at it a little bit more pragmatically without that emotional attachment and say, listen, no matter what the situation is, in order for us to be successful at X, whatever that happens to be in your particular application or business, here's the direction, the route we have to take without that emotional attachment. Because it may be we have to move, or it may be a difference with how we hire or train personnel, or whatever those things are. And we sometimes, listen, change comes hard for most people, and most people remain the same until the pain of remaining the same is greater than the pain of change, right? So when you have someone who's not emotionally attached, change is a little bit more fluid.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And the reality is that I found this in my life. In fact, I'm going through this right now. I'm having somebody do something that I'm not really that good at, but I could do it. But they're way better at it than I am. And then they give me back like the first rendition of this. And I just go back and correct it. And they go back and they do their magic, right? So it's like one of the things I've learned is when we outsource a task, we do not let go of the responsibility of the outsource, but we have to let go of the process of letting them do what's good for them. And then that way we feel safe in the process of, okay, I'm still involved, but now I'm spending 10 minutes versus 10 hours. And that's what I'm hearing you say. That's where
100%. Letting go and having someone else help you with something doesn't mean that we micromanage. In other words, doesn't mean we look over their shoulder once the training aspect of this is over. And they may not do it the exact same way you do, but as long as they arrive at the outcome that you need to see, that's all that matters. Right. And sometimes we have a hard time with that. Those of us who are entrepreneurs, we I know very distinctly, and even from my own experience in the years gone by, we'd hire someone to do a specific job or specific task or specific position. And part of us as entrepreneurs is we're looking over their shoulder to see what it is they're doing, if they're doing it our way, because it's not about right or wrong. We may say it's the right way and that's our justification, but it's about our way. And it's not about our way. If they're going to arrive at the same destination that you need and want them to, how they get there is less of a concern to you as long as it's, legal and moral and ethical.
And in the time frame that you want.
Exactly. 100%.
Right. So it's and that's really difficult for people because they have their ego so far invested in this and that, and what I found is that when you just let go, I remember somebody saying something like, I'm not going to do it your way, but I'm going to do it the right way. I'm going to do it better than you are. Right. And she was right. She got this done in like 4 hours, where it would have taken me like 45 hours to get the same thing done. And the reality is, here's an interesting statistic for those people who are kind of like, I still don't know, right? Authors. We know a lot of authors. We know a lot of people. I've measured this. If an author writes a book and then rewrites the book and then rewrites the book and rewrites the book 4 times, the same book, and they put out the first version and the 4th version out to sell, there will be very little, if any, discernible difference in the amount of sales that comes out of that book. And so the thing is they spent 3 times as long putting the 4th version out as they did the first version. So usually what I have found is let people do what they do. I have a responsibility to understand what they're doing, but I got to get out of the way and let them do what they do naturally. And I think that's another big mistake that people make, Shawn, and I'd love your feedback on this, is I see so many executives and business owners, they go, I just handed that off to Randy. That's Randy's problem now. I'm never dealing with this again. And then all of a sudden it doesn't turn out exactly like they wanted it to. And they go back and blame Randy, but they disengaged completely from the process. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I'll share a quick story. A number of years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I was coming out of a restaurant with my oldest son, and we were in a little mall, strip mall, and just down there's another restaurant. And at the same time that we were exiting the restaurant, an individual that I actually used to work for me many, many years ago when I was in university was coming out of the restaurant with his wife and one of his children. We waved, and we met in the parking lot where our vehicles were, and just a handshake and hi, how are you? Haven't seen you in a while. And I said to him, and he ran a business that was in the construction world. And I said, how's business? And he shook his head. He went, it's not working out the way I thought it would. I said, what's happening? And I'm pretty passionate about business. And when businesses fail, it affects me. It bothers me because very typically, businesses fail because of mismanagement. Yeah, there are exceptions to every rule. Maybe it's government regulations. Maybe it's COVID. Maybe there's a whole bunch of those little things. But generally speaking, businesses fail because of mismanagement. This guy looked at me in the eyes and he said, he says, my staff drove it into the ground. Now, to be very clear with every single one of you watching and listening to this, I just looked at him and I said, wow, it's unfortunate. And I got in my car and left, because that's not a reality. Now, I didn't work for him. He didn't want my input. And I wasn't about to, as they say, throw pearls to swine, because it wouldn't have been accepted. The staff didn't kill his business. Full stop. That is a guarantee. What happened is there was mismanagement. Somebody was not managing this business. And when you let go, as you alluded to a moment ago, Doug, when you let go and wash your hands of it, the challenge that happens is it's going to go in every direction. There still has to be a requirement for you to monitor what's going on. Now, listen, they say truly successful people have a maximum of 3 areas of focus at any given time. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have 100 areas. It just means that they're only focused on 3. And the moment you exceed that, you start to, you don't succeed. You fail at everything. So there's a reality here. I have a lot of irons in the fire. I have a lot of partnerships. I have a lot of companies. I have a lot of clients. But I only have 3 things that I'm engaged in at any given time. Now, I have people that come in and have a consultation with me, have a check-in with me, report back to me, whatever those things are. And that's a reality. I didn't start there, but that's a reality, right? I had a meeting yesterday with someone who's part of a team that I'm engaged in. And we sat for an hour and did a recap and things that have to be done and completed within the next week or 2. I have another one of those coming up this afternoon. So there's a reality to the fact that engagement is key. It doesn't mean you have to be hands-on. It doesn't mean you have to touch or read every email. It doesn't mean you have to take every phone call. It doesn't mean you have to respond to every inquiry. No, that's not what it means. What it means is that you have a clear understanding and that you're engaged in only those activities that move your initiative, your company, whatever it is, in the direction of your goal or objective. And I know that sounds simplistic, but at the end of the day, we tend to overcomplicate sometimes.
think most human beings do this, Shawn. We missed this, Shawn. So, folks, for those of you who are wondering what's going on, I was practicing Shawn's last name and I was mispronouncing it from the beginning. So here's the thing. You can always mispronounce something, make a mistake, you can recover. Shawn Shewchuk. I got it right. There we go. My apologies, Shawn. And the company is changeyourresults.com. And I wrote down a word, and the word was feedback. So I think what happens with people is that they okay, you take this, and then they have no feedback, or they have no ability to understand how to create a feedback loop, and fear kicks in. So then they try to go and micromanage that process. What's your take on that?
I think feedback is imperative, but I'll also add to that, if I can be so bold. And I think what it really comes down to is communication. Once we have communication, understand something, it needs to be rationalized. It cannot be one direction. So, if we take a look at the corporate world, there are a lot of companies that operate in a way where communication comes from the ivory tower down. It never goes back up. And I think if you're really going to build a successful, size is not relevant, because it could be a multinational, or it could be a mom and pop with 5 employees and working somewhere in any city in North America. Communication has to be two-way, and that's where feedback comes in. And when you have a team and you're willing to sit down and have conversations and accept feedback, including some of it you may not want to hear, or suggestions about improvement or on growth. Now, that doesn't mean you have to implement on every one of those, but I want you to understand something. Empowerment of a team is leadership. And when you validate someone's input, someone's criticisms, someone's feedback, it changes the dynamic in your organization and their perspective of you, including the respect.
Can you say that again? Can you say that again, Shawn? Because that was really important.
So when you accept or validate what someone says to you, no matter what it is, no matter how it hurts, even if it's critically damaging to your ego, not necessarily your company, may benefit your company in more ways than you know at the time. If you're willing to accept that, you may not always implement on it, but leadership is about empowerment and allowing those opinions, those thoughts that from your team to come to you. That's how growth happens, right? We all heard the statement, what you validate grows. And here's a reality, what we're talking about today, Doug.
We're speaking with Mr. Shawn Shewchuk, and he has a company called Change Your Results at changeyourresults.com. Shawn, I have a question. Time management, time allocation. I hear people all the time like, oh, I want to manage my time, right? And better. I don't think we can manage time. I love your feedback on this. I like, you only have 24 hours a day. I think we can allocate time. We can't create more time. So when people talk about time allocation and productivity, what are they really talking about from your perspective?
For 2 or 3 generations, we've been told and taught that we have to manage our time better. And there's a flaw in that, because you can't, as you put a moment ago so eloquently, you cannot manage time. You get all there is. You cannot stop this thing from turning. So managing time is a misnomer. You cannot do that. But you can manage the activities in the time that you've been blessed with. And so I think that's an important distinction. As you put a moment ago as well, we only get 24 hours in a day, but 24 hours is a lot. If you really want to break this down, you realize that for the average person today in the United States, there's only 4 hours of productive time out of 24. Really? That's not a lot. And so one of the questions that I ask leaders when we go into an organization is, what would happen to your bottom line at the end of the fiscal year if every one of your team members, we increased their productive time by just 1 hour? If we went from 4 to 5 for every one of your team members, what would happen? Their eyes light up, because this idea that 4 hours is the output of productive time for most people is kind of, that's a stat. A lot of people know this. And so what we focused on is, do you know that the average company today doesn't know what their staff are doing?
That does not surprise me.
Okay. Why don't they know? Because they haven't created something for their staff to follow. They said, you're the director of HR. especially in a small to medium-sized company. So the person goes, yeah, I was hired as a director of HR, and here's my salary, and here's my pay stub, and here's my office and my desk. My business card says I'm this. Just because you have a title and a business card doesn't mean you're good at what you do. I was a young man many years ago, and within 6 months of working for a retail chain while I was in university, they made me a manager. I was a horrible manager. I sucked because I didn't understand. I thought I was a manager because my business card said I was a manager. And that still happens. It's prevalent today, even in the corporate world. You're good at something, so they bump you up. That doesn't mean you're good at that level. Right. So what we really need to understand, and this is so important, if we're going to start to understand time and how to help people with time, let's get clear. What are your obligations and responsibilities? And then let's work together. Let's empower them to execute on those within a specific period of time. If we, instead of saying you have to have this done by Friday, 5 o'clock, people go, well, you know what? My boss is, you know what? Okay. But you say, listen, as a team, we need your help to get this done. So I'm going to give you all the tools you need to ensure that you get this done successfully in the time frame that our client requires. What do we do? We approach this. It's the old adage of, real leaders don't say, go do this. They say, let's go do this. And so what we've done is adapted it to the modern world and say, let's work hand in hand and side by side to ensure we're able to deliver what we promised we would. Right. And so there's a vast difference. What do most entrepreneurs do that gets you referenced this earlier, Doug? You talked about where there's some financial stresses. And so when there's financial challenges, we go head down on the other end in the air, and we miss out on actually what's happening, including opportunities, including those nonverbal cues from our team members, our staff, even if it's just having one person, an assistant who sits 10 feet away from you, who is sitting in your office, answering your phone, setting appointments. Remember something, that individual is the first point of contact. I remember giving a presentation. I was in Reno, Nevada, and we did an interactive component with the audience, and they were all entrepreneurs, where from the stage on a microphone, I called his office. And the poor gentleman, his face was about 30,000 shades of red because of how his staff member handled the phone call. She didn't know I was on stage in front of 700 people. What she realized is there was a guy calling from an unknown number that was asking to set an appointment. And she said, I have no appointments left this week. And I said, perfect. What about next week? She goes, yeah, call back on Monday.
Oops.
Right. And so the whole staff, wow, and all this, and the poor guy. And I said, so what happened? It's not her fault. Right. It's what happened prior to today's phone call. How many phone calls like this have happened? How much money are you spending on marketing that phone number only for those people to pick up the phone and call someone else because they got shot down?
Right.
Right. So when we start to understand that if there is a problem in our business, it's not the employees. Right. Let's go have a look in the mirror. Bob Proctor used to say, let's have a checkup from the neck up. And sometimes that's really important.
So when it comes to allocating, I love what you said, something to the effect of we can manage the actions within a time frame.
Yeah, we can manage the activities. We ought to talk about high leverage activities. Right. We talk about those things, right? So if we can manage those predetermined high leverage activities within the time we've been given. So you have 8 or 9 hours at work today on average, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things I talk to entrepreneurs, especially when they're starting out, is this. We do those things we enjoy. So we may write copy for our website. We might call the sign maker and get a sign made for the front window or for our truck or our van or our car. We may do those things, those transactional activities. But the transformational activities were the ones where we have to pick up our phone and start calling people to book appointments or to sell. Okay, that's where the difference happens. So engaging in those, you only have 8 hours to call clients. You can't call them in most cases at 10 o'clock at night. So again, I'll come back to me being that simple, I used to be a farm kid. If you are on grain farm, and if you don't know this, I'll share this with you. If you wait till the snow falls and the grain is lying flat, it's a loss. You might as well plow it under. So you have a very small window of time in which you can harvest your grain crop. It's the same for all of us. In your business, you have between the hours of 8 and 5. And if you don't engage with prospects and clients during those hours, you have lost those hours. They're precious. Do those things during those hours that are going to move your business, move the needle. in the direction of your goal or objective. And then those things, those transactional things like, maybe if you have to review some accounting documentation or your profit and loss statement, or you have to write copy for a website, or whatever those things, writing an email, responding to somebody that's not, it's not time sensitive, do those things after dinner. Do those things at 5 or 6 in the morning when you get up, because listen, you only have so much time in which to engage a client. And when the time is gone, you can't engage them. You can regret it, but that doesn't change what actually transpired. So one of the things we talk about is this: figure out where you want to go. And I work with people, and I'll share this very openly because I think it's great. Let's figure out what that destination looks like. Where do you want to be in 2 years, including the financial component of that? And then together, we're going to reverse engineer it. And when we reverse engineer it, we understand what has to happen every year, month, week, day, and for guys with undiagnosed ADHD like me, every hour. Okay, what are those high leverage activities we have to be engaged in every one of those time increments? Because if we know what we have to do, we're going to hit that destination or that target. Okay, instead of just saying, yeah, I want to hit $2 million in 2 years. If you've never been there, your brain, your mind doesn't know how to absorb that and do what it takes. So if we break it down into, you can eat a whole apple, but you can't do it in one bite. So we break it down into bite-sized pieces. It's the same thing here. If we take what it is you need to do and break it down into something you can assimilate and understand, your mind understands, you just execute. And in 2 years, you're going to be here, right? But again, sometimes, as we alluded to earlier, Doug, it's human nature to overcomplicate things. Right. Or we get busy, head down on the other end of the year, focused on things that we say need to get done, but we don't necessarily need to be doing it. I called somebody, a former client, about 3 or 4 months ago, and I said, hey, how are you? What's new? Just general conversation. And it was just a touch base phone call. So I'll share this. Every day I phone 3 people without any agenda other than to say hi. They could be a former client, they could be a prospect, it could be someone I met somewhere, but I phone 3 people to say hi. And they'll pick up the phone like, hi, Shawn, how are you? I'm like, good. What can I do for you? And you know what? Nothing. I just want to say hi. How are you? And they're like, that's it. And I want every one of you watching and listening to this to do that. And here's why. Because you become a go-to when you have a wide net. If you're top of mind and tip of tongue, and that individual you called yesterday morning to say hi is having dinner tonight with a friend of his or her, and this person says, listen, I'm looking for X, whatever it is you do, you know what they're going to say? Hey, I got just the guy for you. Here's his phone number and his email address. Right? This is how you build a story. Go ahead.
I was going to say, to back up your point, that literally happened to me. So I was traveling, and a former client I hadn't talked to in a little bit. I just picked up the phone and I said, hey, how are you? I'm going to be out in your area and just want to know, you want to get a cup of coffee, lunch, something? They're like, well, what do you need? What do you want? I'm like, nothing. I just wanted to say hi. Right. They're like, sure. So they get a couple of members together. They go to lunch with me. We get talking, et cetera, et cetera. They're trying to work on a new initiative. I give them an idea, not pitching them on anything. And they go, that's a brilliant idea. Like, we'd like to do this. And I said, okay, well, cool. I think you should. They go, well, who do you know can handle this? I said, well, I know a lot about it. And they said, okay, write us a proposal. And I said, well, before I do that, let's talk, right? So we ended up talking. And back then when I was doing mostly consulting, it turned into a $180,000 consulting arrangement. And for those of you who do consulting, you go, that's not bad, right? So, for a 9-month engagement. So the point being is that reaching out that you're talking about is human to human connection, which most people aren't doing, which is brilliant, Shawn, because you're just reaching out with no agenda whatsoever, but it will materialize into something somehow. I didn't think it was going to. Now, it worked out good for them too. They ended up doubling the size of the business and then selling it just recently for what the owner told me, stupid money. So he's very happy with that. But the reality is that never would have worked out if I just wasn't being a genuine guy like you are, picking the phone up and saying, how you doing?
At the beginning of COVID, in the first week of April 2020, I was invited with a whole bunch of fairly well-known, and most people are going to know who some of the people are on this webinar. There was, I don't know, like 5,000 or 5,500 people on this thing. And one of the speakers, who pontificates a lot about how amazing he is, got on and made a statement, and I took offense to it at some level, because he said, COVID has changed the world. And he was right. But he said, we're never going to hug again, and we're never going to shake hands again, and we're never going to meet in the boardroom table, again. And business as we know it has changed forever. Now, there is some truth in that statement. But, we're social beings. And so going back to what I was saying a moment ago, when you're the go-to and you have people that are reaching out to you, think about this. You leverage your time in a different way. Dr. Nito Cobain, president of High Point University, some of you already know who he is, a mentor of mine, brilliant man. He manages or blocks his time in 5-minute increments. Now, I'm not there yet. I do in 30-minute increments, but he's a brilliant guy. And if you start to understand that you don't, and I know we've all heard this, and it's old news and it's old hat, but you don't get a mulligan. You don't get a rerun. You don't get to it's not a test drive. It's the real thing. So if you start to understand that every minute needs to lead to something, maybe it's to you having a better relationship with your spouse. Maybe it's you spending more time with those people you care for and love, your children, or whoever that happens to be. Maybe it's investing a specific amount of time every week on building strong, powerful, and high trust relationships. So for those of you watching and listening, I get asked a lot, how do I get the big deals? You were just talking, Doug, about a $180,000 deal. One of our former staff members, God bless him, phoned me up about 2 months ago and said, I got a referral for you. We just closed a $200,000 consulting deal. So very similar to what you just did. Why? Because, and people go, oh my gosh, $200,000. Yeah, you know what? We run a company. So yes, it's I'm not complaining, but we have a lot of business to do and deliver for the next 12 months.
Right. But
it's because of relationships. So you don't do $100,000, $200 million deals because you posted something on Facebook or LinkedIn. It comes from having a coffee. It comes from having a glass of wine. It comes from going for dinner. This is where these deals come from. I attend events sometimes, even if I'm not speaking, when I know I'm going to build those strong power. I was at an event in California 3 weeks ago, and unfortunately, I had to fly home early for some personal stuff. I was there for one day, and I made 6 contacts. Those 6 contacts will translate into about $250,000 worth of business. I didn't close it there. I shook hands and we went for lunch. Okay. When you understand you're there to build relationships. And I want to be clear, just because somebody isn't someone you think is going to do business with you, they have a network. And when they turn 40 or 50 or 60 and they have a birthday party and you are in their high trust network and they invite you to their home or to their party, and they, don't take this the wrong way, expose you to 200 of their best friends, there's trust involved. And the trust is transference.
Yep.
Okay, of those relationships.
And the actual cost of reaching out to 200 cold prospects and developing 200 relationships over a period of time compared to that one introduction you were talking about it's far more efficient for that one relationship and far more effective because like you said, there's a transference of trust immediately. So now there's a different level of conversation that's going on.
I also do this. I'm asked, and I'll share this with you. I'm asked probably once a week, at least, maybe more, why I do what I do. Many years ago, Bob Proctor said something to me, and he was my first coach. He said, matter of fact, he wrote the foreword to my first book, Change Your Mind, Change the Results. And he said, none of us are getting out of this alive. And he's right. But I've also been told when it's my turn to check out, and let's be clear, I'm not looking forward to that anytime soon. I have far too much left to do, but I want to make sure it's a movie worth watching. And so I'll share this with you. When I wrote my first book many, many years ago, and this is the first book, we did a tour, and I was on radio and television and podcasts and you name it, all over. And I received an unsolicited message on Facebook from a young girl who I'd never met and have never met and never had any further communication with. And she said, "Dear Mr." It was 2 or 3 sentences, but it was to the effect of, "Dear Mr. Shewchuk, thank you for writing your book. I read it. It changed my life." This is why so many of us persist in doing this, because Bob Proctor also said something many years ago. He said, "Shawn, it's the hardest business you'll ever get into." And there are challenges because you're selling something that's an intangible. Right. But I want to tell you something. When I get to watch people's lives change, their businesses, their relationships, their marriages, their relationships with their children, everything that may be considered challenging is all worthwhile. And that's what this is really all about.
So Shawn, if somebody wants to get a hold of you or get a hold of the company, learn more, where do they go? What do they do?
You can go to change, as you've been alluding to for the last few minutes, you can go to changeyourresults.com. If you'd like to get a copy of the book or any of the books or the journals, you can go to highproductivitystore.com. And of course, on the website, you can reach out to us. You can, and this is an interesting one. I get a lot of this, so I'll share this. You can actually text us, and the phone number is 403-457-4002, 403-457-4002. That's our main phone number. We have an 800 number, but that's our main phone number. And when I do a lot of these interviews, I get a lot of text messages, people asking questions. So feel free to do that.
Excellent. Shawn, thanks so much for being here today on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. I really appreciate you being here.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Manage the activities within a time frame. I love that because that's the reality of it. You cannot make more time. You cannot even manage time. Time is not a manageable asset for you. You only have so much time. Time is a given quantity given to you every single day that you are alive. But you can manage the activities within that time frame that you are given. So how do you take that, make it the most effective? And how do you make it the most efficient? When you make it the most efficient, that gives you more time space within that day. Now, not more time, but more space to kind of reallocate things. So in other words, if it takes you 20 minutes to do something now and you can get it done in, say, 10 minutes, that gives you back 10 minutes to do something else more productive. And as a selling entity, which all of you are and you must be in business, what is the number one priority that you should be looking at on a daily basis? How do you get new clients? How do you get existing clients to buy more? How do you expand that revenue within what you're doing on a consistent and never-ending process? How do you do that? And that should be priority number one. One thing I'd like to give you that Shawn and I didn't have a chance to talk about, if you drew a circle and you then started slicing that circle up in a pie and you looked at it and you said, okay, these are activities that are actually giving me clients and these are activities that are not giving me clients, what would that ratio be during the day? Take a good look at that because based on your plan, that ratio should be equal to that plan. In other words, like he said, if you had a $2 million plan in 2 years, are you actually getting to that number by allocating that time and then doing the activities and managing those activities within that time frame to actually, in most cases, get you new clients, get you existing clients to buy more, get you to have clients who hadn't bought for a while to re-engage? Are you spending your time in going out, getting revenues through the door for high profit? In other words, doing high profit, high value, and leveraged efficiency, if you will? Or are you spending the majority of your time in things that are like, oh my gosh, that's pulling from that? Because when you just do a simple little pie chart like that, you'll see where you're spending your hours or your time in a percentage capacity, and you can readjust as you go along. If you love this subject matter, please give it a 5-star review. Please tell your friends, right? The more people that we have listened, the more our rankings go up, the more people we help, the more experts we can bring on here. If you know someone, yourself or someone else who's an expert, and you have a subject matter you'd like to, say, hey, I'd like to have a showdown on this, reach out to us at YouMatter, YOUMATTER, at ceosalesstrategies.com and let us know. We'll answer all inquiries. If you're looking to get yourself into the top 1% of sellers or someone you know in the top 1% of sellers, we're rolling out our academy this year. We're also rolling out a SaaS product, which is an automated prospecting and follow-up, meaningful, relevant follow-up system to help you convert more sales. We're starting a waiting list for the both of those. If you're interested in that, send me an email at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com. Till next time, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast saying, go out, sell something, sell a lot of it, play win-win, make someone happy. In other words, they have a problem or an opportunity they want to resolve. You can help them resolve that they'll make you happy too by paying you for that. Do it over and over and over again. Make a lot of friends, expand that circle, get referrals, continue the process. Until next time, to your success. Okay, guys, that's a wrap. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success.